developing competencies. We've looked at the provisional model. The provisional model made up of meta competencies and core competencies. What we need to do is consider the components, the individual components of these core competencies. And what we can do is look at each of these in turn. The first core competence within the provisional model is about knowledge and cognitive understanding. And within this competence, there are clear components. The teacher has tacit understanding of knowledge linked to their reflection. Tacit means that it's not explicit but implicit to the individual. It's linked closely, in a sense, to Sean's reflection in action as part of the reflective process. Another component of this competence is the technical theoretical aspect of reflection, or in other words, how the teacher is looking at their own knowledge base and seeing how this can be transferred, how it's applied, how to use this in their teaching. Another component of this particular competence is the procedural aspect of teaching and what the teachers actually do in relation to the activities that they engage with in the classroom. And of course, there is a contextual component. This is the general background to the teaching that the teacher does, or in other words, the educational environment, both within the school but also within any particular country. The functional competence has four key components. One we can see here is is relating to the occupation specifically, in other words, the profession of teaching, and all the specific tasks and duties that teachers take on. Within this competence, there is also a component relating to organizational processes, or in other words, the teacher's role in planning and managing learning, organizing resources and monitoring processes and procedures. Within this particular competence, we are also considering the activities that the teacher engages with intellectually, or in other words, the cerebral, the mental activities associated with thinking. And of course, there are the psychomotor activities. These are the physical and practical hands-on skills that the teacher has. Within the personal and behaviour competence, there are two components. The first component relates to teaching as a social and vocational set of skills. And this very much relates to things like confidence and our ability, the strengths that we bring, and our ability to keep going when things can be quite difficult. And also there's a component which is about our roles with other professionals, or in other words, the intra-professional component of reflective practice. And within the competence of values and ethics, there are two components. One component is our own values and beliefs and assumptions about teaching and about our roles as teachers. And also there's a professional component, which is about professional codes of practice and about ideas and approaches for how teachers work with students. So we can see that the professional competencies have very particular components, and all of these components, along with the meta competencies, lead to particular outcomes. And what we need to think about as reflective practitioners are the range of these particular outcomes. Well, outcomes come in three forms. One form can be macro outcomes, or in other words, these are very broad, big outcomes, large results in terms of professional activity within the classroom. we would generally look at these in terms of things like student achievements. If lots of students get grade A's, this would be a macro outcome. We can also think in terms of micro outcomes as well. These are focused within the group, within a session, and very much relate to particular outcomes in terms of activities that might be taking place. For example, as a teacher, you might use some small group activity in a lesson, and therefore a particular micro outcome might be students increasing confidence with discussing and negotiating in groups of people. And of course, along with the macro outcomes and the micro outcomes, there can also be partial outcomes. These are the outcomes that the reflective practitioner will consider when outcomes are achieved only partially from an activity. And it's these outcomes and this framework of competencies which leads to reflection for the reflective practitioner.